So the UK has had some trouble recently with trans activists and drag queen story hour in schools, libraries, galleries and pubs. The occupants of our former colony across the pond have had much more luck in opposing this kind of genital, gender mistreatment and mutilation. Founder of Drag Queen Story Hour actually said that they wanted to break from the reproductive futurity of the normative classroom and nuclear family and introduce queer ways of knowing and being into early childhood education. So we know that it's not just inclusive and wholesome and family-friendly entertainment, but for some reason the legislators in the UK haven't cottoned on. Fortunately, those in Tennessee and the US have. So maybe we should look at the bill that's been recently passed in the Tennessee legislature and learn how we over in the UK can combat this weird scourge. If you want to know about the dangers of allowing this ideology to go unchallenged, you can go to our website and watch this video I did quite a while ago now in September called The Killer Clowns of Leftism, where I asked what drag queens and serial killers have in common, because I watched quite a lot of material on John Wayne Gacy and found it to be very similar to the types of people that want access to children. I suppose they might have some skeletons in their closet just as Gacy did, quite literally. But anyway, let's go on to what's been happening in the US. So, as we can see from reporting from the Daily Wire here, there's been a Tennessee bill to ban sex change procedures on minors, and it's currently sitting on the governor's desk because it was passed resoundingly with the Republican-controlled body, legislative body in Tennessee, with a vote of 77 to 16. And Matt Walsh and James Lindsay helped get this across the line, speaking to Senator Marsha Blackburn and also to some of the representatives in the House. So, all good stuff. It seems that their vocal opposition to the ideology has really made some change here. So just sitting behind a desk and complaining about things does actually happen, you know. The governor said, "We should not allow permanent, life-altering decisions that hurt children. With the partnership of the General Assembly, this practice should end in Tennessee," he said after Matt Walsh actually revealed that the Vanderbilt University Medical Center had performed double mastectomies on minors. So there was a hospital right near the Daily Wire headquarters. Matt Walsh put that online, and they then went and shut that down. So they paused all such surgeries in October 2022 after an inquiry from the Republican lawmakers. In an opinion story for the Tennessean later that month, Lambeth said that the surgeries would be considered abuse and had no place in Tennessee. So the pressure being kept up by alternative media outlets like the Daily Wire and hopefully ourselves over here someday have pressured politicians into recognizing the immeasurable harm done to children by gender ideology and all its practitioners in surgery. They also decided to pass this bill around the same time. And this bill creates an offence for a person who engages in adult cabaret performances on public property or in a location where the adult cabaret performance could be viewed by a person who is not an adult. So it's the don't take your children to strip clubs to see drag queen story hour bill. And
how old-fashioned.
I know, yeah.
Really?
It's really far right and radical
It's
to not want a man
crazy.
in a thong having dollar bills shoved down near between his buttocks by a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
It's really oppressive, that. I don't know if you've seen the videos coming out of Florida and the like, where men are wearing prosthetic breasts in a box and simulating sexual acts on stage in front of children in supposedly conservative states as well. They're doing it deliberately on your home turf.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, Satan is here.
Unfortunately so.
Yeah, with us.
So if we could see how Matt Walsh leveraged the issue, he actually went to the hearing for this bill and gave some testimony. And recently there have been some creators who self-identify as anti-woke. The Quartering has apologised for maybe taking pot shots at Matt, saying he was too mean. But
I mean, trigonometry.
Trigonometry as well did that, yes. Yeah, they took the fence-sitting approach of saying maybe you shouldn't be too mean about
What
men.
a pair of cucks. Honestly. If you're going to be
They're
lukewarm
never coming
about...
back on our show, are they? Oh, dear.
Going to be lukewarm about bloody child abuse, there's something wrong.
Yeah, frankly, I agree. I don't think we can come together and have a calm conversation about people that want to castrate 16-year-old boys. I don't think there's any compromise to be had
No,
there.
of course there's no compromise.
Yeah.
There's no debate on it.
Matt
Sorry, but-
decided to go all-out linguistic war
Good, I love
against
Matt.
that kind of containment position. And I think we can watch some of his Senate testimony, because he's speaking to politicians here as well as he spoke offline to people in our spheres who are kind of gatekeeping the terms of engagement as to how we should engage on the issue, be utterly unapologetic. Let's watch the first one where he decides to rebuke a Tennessee Democrat smear jobbing him.
Can you give us a summary of your educational background or your healthcare education experience?
Mr. Walsh, you recognized. My experience in healthcare?
Your educational background. I'm just curious. You testified as to a lot of your own research. So I'm curious for what purpose you do that and what background you have to qualifies you to speak to that?
Well, my
Mr.
background
Walsh.
that qualifies me to speak to this is that I'm a human being with a brain and common sense, and I have a soul. And so, therefore, I think it's a really bad idea to chemically castrate children. That is my experience. Also, I did. Now, it's true. I didn't go to college, but I did go to school long enough to learn how to read, so I can read the data for myself, and that's exactly what I've done.
Representative Clemens, you're
And
recognized.
for what purpose do you conduct your research and use this brain of yours?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
I use it for the purpose of trying to protect children from being castrated and mutilated. That's one of the things I try to do.
You don't use it to.
Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You don't use it to get clicks on your
Let's state that.
publication.
Well, are you using it right now to try to get clicks with this interaction?
On,
No, I really like the
Mr.
idea
Walsh.
of getting of drawing attention to the fact that this is happening to children. I know you seem to find it very amusing. I don't.
See, what I really
I adore
like
that
there-
man.
Oh no, it's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What I really like is the dismantling of the fourth wall in the media age by Matt, because he pointed out that the Richard Nixon lookalike Democrat rep there is playing to the activist peanut gallery online and is trying to improve his standing with the 8% of radical activists that exist and control the conversation on the left in America.
Yeah.
Matt Walsh immediately cuts past that and he goes, no, you're not talking to me, so you don't get to accuse me of trying to generate clickbait when I have some sincere convictions about this issue, because
Yeah.
I have children, I know children that are being put through this, I care about this issue.
Yeah.
You don't get to accuse me of unilaterally standing on a soapbox and trying to get clicks when you're being purely performative because you want re-election and you want to placate
Yeah.
to the activist base. You don't get to do that.
And also, what do you want? Somebody who doesn't have a fan base or doesn't have a following? I mean, if Christ had like nobody watching and nobody following, wouldn't have gone quite as well, would it?
No.
If you're preaching the message.
Well, also, this is completely undercut by their argument that you constantly need representation to reflect an audience back. The audience
Yeah.
has to be established there for the person to be an on-screen ambassador for whatever aggrieved constituency you allocate them. If there were no trans community that were going to be watching a person, then why would you need trans representation? So the audience genuflection is just a disingenuous smear, and Walsh dealt with it really well. I've been on
Yeah.
these kind of debates before on
Yeah.
mainstream telly where you know the person is just trying to hammer their point across and not even addressing you, and you just have to go, right, so you're not going to answer my question then. Okay, so just all the audience know
Yeah.
you're just here to do a talking point and get
Yeah.
clicks when you don't really care about the issue, whereas I actually care about solving the issue.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Just cut straight to the quick.
And
Perfect.
Walsh has seen the slippery slope getting ever slidier, and he's just gone, that's it. I'm just going to put my foot right down to stop the slide.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of which, the slippery slope, Matt just goes straight to the heart of the issue and asks, okay, well, if children can consent to gender surgery, what else can they consent to? Would you like children to consent to that, Democrat rep, by any chance? And the stunning silence which ensues is entertaining, but also, again, very illustrative to the floating voters as to who are the sensible voices in this conversation. Let's play this clip, please.
I found it. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. I found it interesting. One of our people testified today that they had their gender affirming surgery at 16. And I know you in former comments mentioned this on your blog. At about 16, you're an adult who is mature and can make decisions. You're that at 16. I don't care what anybody says. Even going so far as to say, 16 people. When you're 16, you should be married and could be pregnant or should be pregnant. So I'm curious if 16 is an adult in your view. Why does this bill have the minor defined as 18?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
Yeah, that's a hit piece you took from Media Matters, from something when I was a radio host 13, 14 years ago, in my early 20s. It's also not an accurate reflection of what I actually said. I was talking about the fact that people tended to marry young historically, and that's all that was about. How does that relate to this subject?
I'm just curious of your definition of if you feel like people are adults at 16 should.
Well, people are
should
adults
this-
at 18, but actually your brain is not fully developed until you're 25. So we should be having a conversation about whether we should even be doing these surgeries to people at 18. But certainly before 18, it's absurd. I mean, do you think that a 16-year-old can meaningfully consent to having their body parts removed? Do you? No?
We do not, yeah, we ask the questions. It's not, it's, Representative Hammer, you are recognized.
Ooh, look at that dive in to save from
We
the
asked the questions.
tumbleweed-shaped bullet that was
Oh,
going
they all
straight
went. You
towards him.
could actually hear the buttocks go. Yeah, clench.
It doesn't have a sphincter left.
Yeah.
It's got its own orbit now.
Yeah.
But that is, again, the directness, the calmness, the unwilling to accept their framing, which is why he rejected the more softer trigonometry position. That is the most effective way of cutting through to this issue. You have to be very disagreeable. We're not going to get anywhere by singing from the leftist hymn sheet, and that's why he's been very effective. And the final clip that I wanted to play that's just a little bit longer is him rejecting the framing as fed to him by a Republican rep who has said, well, we have been confronted with this emotional blackmail line of you can either have a trans kid or a dead kid, which most parents who are apolitical don't understand the ideology. That's an impossible position to put them in. That's sickening to say that medical experts should be able to drug and surgically augment your child. Otherwise, they're going to be on an inexorable road to suicide. Of course, people acquiesce to that. Matt cuts straight to the quick and undermines that argument brilliantly. Let's play the final one.
Yeah.
Just a quick question for you. We've heard in the news last week and even today that it's pro-life to vote against this bill. We've heard that suicides are prevalent, and suicide has impacted my family, so I'm sensitive when I hear something like that. I've read some of the stuff that you've done, and I was wondering, can you speak to the statistics of mental health and suicidal tendencies for the people who have gone through transition and for people who have not? In your studies, from what I've read, can you speak to that?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
Sure. Well, the claim that doing the chemical castration drugs or surgery or hormonal intervention, the claim that this prevents suicide or has positive psychological effects down the line is utterly, totally baseless. There are no credible long-term studies that bear that out. And one of the reasons for that is that there couldn't possibly be any credible long-term studies because we've never done this to kids on this scale ever before in history. So this current, shall we say, crop of children, they are the guinea pigs. This is all experimental. We're sort of trying it out on them to see if it works. Now, they have attempted a few times to do studies, and the interesting thing is that the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, WPATH, which is a radical far-left pro-trans organization, they commissioned a study to try to prove that that hormones and puberty blockers decrease suicide rates among trans-identified youth. And even in their own study, they found that they couldn't prove it. They couldn't make that link because it's just not possible to do. The other thing I would mention too is that the number of trans-identified youth has skyrocketed in recent years. We're talking about exponential 10x, 20x growth. Just huge numbers have increased. And what we hear from the pro-trans side is that, well, this is not a social contagion. It's just that, there's always been this many trans people. It's just that they were not in an affirming environment before in history, and so they couldn't come out. And now, for the first time, trans people have the ability to live their truth, so to speak. Well, if that's the case, and there have always been these sort of like millions of trans people, and if it's also true that if we don't affirm them, that it would cause them to commit suicide, then we should be able to look back in history and find just this unbroken, incredible epidemic of children mysteriously killing themselves because they weren't being affirmed as trans. And what you find is that that didn't exist. I mean, the youth suicide rate has increased exponentially alongside trans affirmation. So trans affirmation causes the suicide rate, not the other way around. The last thing I'll note is that the suicide rate among trans-identified people is sky high. It remains sky high. All the data shows this. It remains sky high even after surgery. And in fact, in the most reliable data that we have, it's years after surgery when suicidality is the highest for trans-identified people. That's the reality.
See, the great thing about that as well is that they are trying to colonize the compassionate argument, aiming at a parents saying, would you rather a dead kid or a trans kid, aiming it at the everyday Joe, just saying just use the pronouns or just affirm their identity, because you don't know what they're going through. You're gonna cause LGBTQ plus element of people to commit suicide en masse.
Yeah.
What Matt is saying is, okay, I have the evidence these activist organizations' studies are not true. We have the historical data to prove that their solutions are not the case.
Yeah.
And so what you are providing as the sole possible solution not only has medical and reproductive downsides, but if you see the suicide rate going up, that is not the way to help these people who are genuinely struggling with their identity either as adults or have been propagandized into this inauthentic identity as children.
Exactly, and indoctrinated by parents who, let's be honest, sometimes if they have a boy who puts on a dress or makeup, goes, we couldn't possibly have a gay son. We're going to make you female. A lot of this is a pathology coming from adults.
I don't know if you're familiar with Richie Herron by any chance.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
So we did a fantastic interview with him on the website, again free for everyone to check out. It's done really well on YouTube.
Yeah.
And he himself said he struggled to accept that he was a gay man.
Yeah.
And so he went through all the surgeries, including what he now calls a genital lobotomy. And he said
Yes.
if only someone would have intervened and had a conversation with me that I was denying my own identity and I might have had other mental comorbidities, we'll say for YouTube at the time, then this would have stopped me going down this path that I now can't take back.
Yeah, it's utterly horrific. It's like everything is inverted from the things that we understand to be true, and it isn't. The idea. I mean, Matt. I honestly, I think Matt's a hero. Matt Walsh is a hero. We need more people like him in various areas of the stuff we discuss.
Yeah, unwilling to acquiesce to obvious untruths on the
completely.
grounds that you've been told it's compassionate to lie, and I don't think it's ever compassionate to lie in the long term. No, I'm on the Jordan Peterson train of tell the truth or at least don't lie, because you're not putting harm out into the world that can lead for someone else to act on false assumptions and then get themselves hurt. That's really not right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that I'd like to talk about then in the UK the recent Drag Queen Story Hour protest organised by Turning Point UK. Transitioning from the trans issue to the drag queen issue might not be connected in everyone's minds, because of course we were told for how many years that drag is just adult entertainment, it's definitely a man, but now we see drag artists using female pronouns while in the drag personas in things like BBC articles, and Tennessee passed both those bills, the anti-drag for kids bill and the anti-trans for kids bill at the same time, because as the creator of Drag Queen Story Hour USA has said, they're trying to bring queer ways of knowing and being, that's queer as in the queer theory term, which means gender deconstruction and Marxist revolution, into early childhood education. So Drag Queen Story Hour is the transmission vector for trans ideology. It's their indoctrination tool to then set you on the path to changing your identity and becoming a permanent, resentful revolutionary, and also not having kids, because for some reason lots of the postmodernists, including Simone de Beauvoir, had a really nihilistic streak underneath it where they really wanted abortion and depopulation because they hated themselves, and so they're regressing us back into the void before creation. They're miserable people, absolutely.
Nihilists.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Spot on. I wanted to look at this protest because I'm not going to disparage anyone that was there genuinely. I mean, there were 5 people arrested. There was a South Asian gentleman standing there doing mid-century German Austrian painter salutes, which isn't very smart at all. No. And I also wouldn't suggest that any British patriots support the side of the Second World War that we beat into oblivion quite happily. So I think he's probably some kind of cringeworthy undercover police officer, because half these groups are anyway.
Yeah.
But the people that actually turned up, I don't want to disparage it, there were about 30. And then, of course, there's hundreds of the renter mob from Stand Up to Racism turned up with signs like that says, "Queer joy is for all ages." I'm really glad that they've just started writing it on placards, that we know that they have untoward
plain
intentions
sight.
towards children. Yeah,
Plain sight.
And I don't want to disparage the sort of parents and the politically minded people at the shop. Our friend of the show, Calvin Robinson, showed up and spoke down there, which is why I was on his GB News show as well, talking
He was
about
great,
it.
and he got shouted. Didn't he get like sirens going off?
As
when
per
he was trying
usual,
to,
because
just trying to silence him.
Petulant children cannot win the grounds of we have a succinct argument. Instead, they just scream far right, fascist, woo,
Yeah, all
repeatedly.
scary. Yeah.
And this was the person
Oh,
that
Christ.
decided to read to children, the Disney villain. definitely appropriate. The point I'm making is that I'm not disparaging people for getting out in the street and complaining about it, because everyday parents really should take a stand to this. And it's clearly effective in some branches, because otherwise the leftists wouldn't pay renter mobs to show up and manufacture a consensus of hundreds of people with their pre-printed signs and horrible makeup as being on the side of this, and so the government should take action. But it's far more effective to come armed with succinct arguments and who to aim them at, as Walsh has done, as Lindsay has done. Because largely, it's the Robert Putnam bowling alone thing of where when diversity increases, the only two things that increase are TV watching and protest marches. If there's protests every other weekend about everything, the Honor Oak protest, the ULEZ protest, the Stand Up for Iran protest, there's so many going on. Not only can we not keep track of them and attend them as actual media figures, but most people don't care. And it starts to look performative. And so I'm not dismissing these protests. It's somewhat valuable, but we do need to be more precise at who we're aiming the protests at.
Yeah.
Now, why were the people protesting this? That's also a valid question. Because we keep hearing over and over, it's family friendly. And I got invited on Sunday. We're not going to play the clip. You can watch the thing in your own time
Who's
if you
that
fancy
handsome man?
Wouldn't know. I got invited to discuss this on the wonderful Calvin Robinson's show opposite Andrew Eborn. And Andrew, off air, is a very nice guy. But he was far too willing to take on the face what the organisation said about themselves being family friendly. Because he called up the pub and the organisation and they said, don't worry, all our content is very appropriate. It's all family friendly. It's
Sure it is.
totally above board. And he took their word for it, even though I said from the Drag Queen Story Hour founders paper that they said that family friendly only means family in so much as it's a code to identify other queers on the street.
Yeah.
And we're going to adopt you into a drag family. Doesn't matter. They say it's family friendly.
They mean the Manson family.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Hence my link to John Wayne Gacy at the start.
Yeah.
Well, we have another friend of the show here, Dominique Samuels, who on her Twitter, she was forwarded by a parent, if you can go to the next one, please, John, video of a drag queen stripping off in front of kids, hiking the skirt up around their backside, which I can only assume is fake, and doing the splits with exposed underwear in this pub. Now, that's not the same drag queen that performed when the Honor Oak protest was going on. This was earlier. This was a drag queen called Copper Top Queen, right? Now,
Yes.
below this tweet, we're not going to scroll to that particular part, but we can scroll down a little bit, John, just because Dominique has posted a follow-up conversation on Instagram. Copper top is a slang term for a sex act involving excrement and fellatio. I'll leave that up to your
I was
sordid
thinking of
imagination.
Duracell batteries. That's how clean my mind is. Copper top.
You'd be better off licking those, I think, actually.
Yeah.
So during this, because Dominique posted this on her Instagram, this drag queen got in touch with Dominique and kept calling her far right. And on another post, if you can just scroll down to the screenshots, John,
Yeah.
just below again, just keep going, keep going, keep going. There we go. Yeah. Some parent spoke to the establishment and said, I don't think that's particularly appropriate. If we can go to the next screenshot, Coppertop replied saying, when you spread misinformation like this, it isn't going to end well. And I suggest you educate yourself and do some research. Everyone attending the Honor Oak knew this was a drag brunch. Our songs are age appropriate. This defamation of character is disgusting. You are fueling a far-right fire and we will come for you. So openly threatening a mother online, but because they're part of the oppressed class of gender-confused people, they have no consequences for this. So, okay, fair enough. The content is disgusting, right? But it's a private institution, right? It can do what it wants. As long as parents are showing up and bringing their own kids, what's the harm? It's also in taxpayer-funded institutions, if you didn't know that. This was an Isle of Man school who brought in a drag queen to do sex education, PSHE, and they said there are 73 genders. They taught them about anal sex and masturbation. This was year 7 pupils, by the way. When one child said they're upset and responded there's only 2, the drag queen responded, you've upset me, and made the child leave the class. So they had unsupervised ability to discipline the children if they said the wrong thing as well.
Yeah.
Some 11-year-olds at the school were taught about oral and anal sex. Some learned about sex change operations and were shown how a skin graft from a girl's forearm could be used to create an artificial penis. A lot of children are too traumatised to even talk to their parents. Eliza Cox, vice chairman of Maroon Commissioners, told Energy FM on the Isle of Man, "As a parent, you don't know what your children are being taught." So there's a petition by the parents at Queen Elizabeth II High School, and I think there was about 500 signatures. And they said, "We considered the attendance of a drag queen in class and alienating students clearly confused about the information discussed during this session wholly inappropriate. How, who, and why was this guest speaker permitted to discuss gender issues to an inappropriate child audience by an inexperienced and untrained adult?" So then the Isle of Man government have said it would take a commission and an independent review to gain an independent understanding of what has taken place. Just keep repeating the words independent, and we think there's going to be accountability. Of course. The head teacher is now also dismissing parents' concerns as online misinformation. But, interesting development in this. Miriam Cates, who was a Conservative MP on the Education Select Committee, one of the MPs that was recently shouted down by that mad ginger Labour activist saying that they're transphobic. She said, "When parents raise serious safeguarding concerns about inappropriate and sexualizing materials being used in sex education lessons in schools, the right response is to pause these lessons while the matter can be investigated. I applaud authorities in the Isle of Man for making this decision. But similar and worse, materials are being used in schools across the UK, and Department for Education has persistently ignored whistleblowers who raise concerns. The UK government needs to take its lead from the Isle of Man." So we've seen a Conservative peer talk about drag queen story out the tape. We've now seen Miriam Cates MP talking about this specific issue and sexual content in PSHE, which the likes of Calvin Robinson and the New Culture Forum have been hammering away at for quite some time. We're seeing politicians start to take notice because we are so at the point of peak woke. We've been pushing it to the forefront. We have videos, we have parental complaints, we have the papers and academic disciplines which openly admit that, yes, we're obsessed with indoctrinating children into sexualized ideologies, that they can't deny it anymore. So what I'm saying is, don't necessarily focus your ire on the street level activists. Start aiming it at the MPs with letter writing campaigns and videos constantly. Just keep up the pressure. Do what Matt Walsh has done. That's the smartest thing to do. Because now it's affecting the politicians themselves. I don't know if you've seen this last story here. There's a Conservative councillor who went into a Westminster pub called the Marquis of Granby. The councillor is Ruby Sampson. And she's alleged in this article that she's written herself that she went into the toilets and there was a transgender woman. So man who identifies as a woman, right?
Yeah.
In there. And the hand dryer wasn't working. And she said she had no choice but to awkwardly shake her hands dry. And the broad-shouldered person in a dress turned to them and replied, "I'm going to wipe my hands on my penis," and with that walked out. So openly...
I was there the other night, Mark. I was thinking about the one in Westminster.
Yes.
Well, yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
No, it wasn't.
You weren't accosted by this broad-shouldered,
I wasn't. Not that night.
brave and stunning woman, were you, by any chance?
No.
The article does use the preferred pronouns, though, of her accoster. I don't know if that's the word you would use, so beware acquiescing. This is the Westminster bubble, after all, but pop a bit of a fight. So what's happened is that the trans activist herself, himself, itself, whatever... Next one, please, John, has outed themselves and is saying that, well, they said jeans, not penis. So they're saying, oh, I just said I wanted to wipe my hands on my jeans. Definitely didn't mention my formerly male feminine appendage. Couldn't fathom why they're possibly scared of you. But
Yeah.
the point is they know they're being provocative. Like, you know you're going in there. You know that you are presenting slightly differently to who that toilet is purpose for. And so this is the equivalent of saying this person's transphobic and they're not accepting me, and why didn't you just treat me as a normal woman? This is the equivalent of swinging their fist right by your nose, and when you go and tell the police officer this person might assault me, they're going, well,
Yeah.
I don't know what you're mad about. I'm not touching you at all. Absolutely
You're a
not.
fox in a hen house
Spot on.
pretending to cluck
Yeah.
and then going, oh, I meant,
Yeah. These feathers are not glued on at all, officer.
Yeah.
But in the last tweet in the thread, we can see that it doesn't really faze the person in question.
yeah, the lady,
Because-
the lady.
Yeah, Ruby has
girl.
written a letter to Kemi Badenoch demanding why we aren't looking into protecting single-sex spaces like changing rooms and toilets. So the point is, when it starts to affect the politicians, that is when we get change. So if we just relentlessly bring it to their attention there, like Matt Walsh has done, and do not accept the framing of the left, and do not cede grounds on the grounds of compassion, then that is the way that we create legislative challenges. And the Isle of Man seems to be a wedge issue where you can crowbar that open and say, okay, here are the materials that are going to a taxpayer-funded institution. This is obviously a case of inappropriate malfeasance and misallocation of funds, the government has to step in here. And so if people decide to take issue with galleries like the Tate that are receiving government arts grants, or public libraries that are misallocating taxpayer funds, this kind of thing, I think there's grounds for a legal challenge if we bring it to the attention of enough politicians and make it so they can't ignore our voices anymore.
There's one problem, well, slight problem with that,
Yes.
is that we're talking about politicians who thought it was okay to lock the world down.
I agree.
And I mean, the human rights abuses are off the scale. So why would they be particularly interested in protecting women and girls?
I agree. And
She says, throwing a slice spanner in the works.
and I don't contend that, but there are some who were dumb enough to have voted along with it at the time, and now, because of unspecified medical treatment, which we can't mention on YouTube, they have changed their minds. For example, Danny Kruger, Andrew Bridgen, Christopher Chope, all these people have, even Jacob Rees-Mogg to an extent, all of these people have turned around and gone, well, maybe that vote was the wrong way, and we're seeing the repercussions of talking the government line. That is only because enough people on mainstream media, or the dissident networks at least, or formerly dissident networks, on Twitter and on fringe conspiracy sites, like ours, I guess, said, well, hang on a minute, this doesn't look right, this data doesn't look right, this policy doesn't look right, why are you imprisoning us or enforcing these changes on us? And slowly, their minds changed. Now, people got hurt in the meantime. That is inexcusable, whether it's for the trans issue or for unspecified medical intervention. But we at least have to accept the rate of change we are given and work within it. And the best thing we can do is turn some of those tepid backbenchers or the Lee Anderson types to our favour.
Yeah.
So it
Possibly.
might be a white pill.
Yeah, I because you see, I mean, sorry, just going back to so we don't go down the unspecified treatment path. But my argument has always been you don't need data to explain moral choice.
I agree. Unfortunately,
what's that got to do with
these people's minds are captured by utilitarianism, and we need to get it so that they speak our language of principles rather than just what's practical and what they can do before they'll agree with us. So we'll find a way. Not to disparage the parents going out and protesting drag queen story on the street, but the police will crack down on you, and you will be drowned out by whatever astroturf leftist movement show up on the day with pre-printed placards. So write a letter to your MP, post it online, and get tweeting and talking about it, I suppose. But well done to Tennessee. Maybe we can learn some lessons.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Symposium series, this episode on patriotism. If you want to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.